So we're picking up where we left off. The section we read last time was mainly about him spending time in Maine, and this is also from that period. Freight Cars, Gloucester, 1928. Well, that's interesting. We're back to some of his drawings, but these say they're studies, and I believe they specifically said they were avoiding choosing to feature anything that was in preparation for another painting. So that was study of a landscape with road and houses, fabricated chalk on paper. This is study of a field with tractor and farm animals. 1920, fabricated chalk on paper. It's our third blank page. I don't think that's a common thing to do. This is Railroad Crossing, which is, I believe, one of the ones that was discussed previously. 1922 to 1923, oil on canvas. On East Side Somewhere, fabricated chalk on paper. Study of a landscape with train passing houses, 1920, fabricated chalk on paper. Our fourth blank page. Railroad Sunset, 1929, oil on canvas. Compartment C car, oil on canvas, 1938. Repair car, 1965, oil on canvas. Blank page number 5. McCombs Dam Bridge, 1935, oil on canvas. Ships and lighthouses. Edward Hopper was fascinated by maritime vessels since childhood. He grew up in Nyack, New York, a small town on the Hudson River where boat building was one of the most important industries. At an early age, he began making drawings and paintings of rowboats, sailing vessels, warships, and steamers. In his later years as well, nautical motifs continued to shape Hopper's work. The bootleggers, which you are seeing now, a motorboat occupied by 3 men is the focus of the action, a smuggling exploit at twilight. It heads towards a house with a luminous yellow half-drawn window shades, where a 4th man is waiting. Compositionally, the boat is both linked to the sea and the house. It sits deep in the water and with its curved form and steeply rising bow, fits itself into the swell. At the same time, the boat's yellow, orange, and blue hues correspond to the colors of the house, which stand elevated on a landmass. Here the boat functions as a kind of connector. Not just in the sense of the secret transfer of goods from a larger ship to the shore, but also generally between nature and civilization. For Lee Shore, which is this, Hopper selected a perspective from land overlooking the sea and sailboats. From the slightly elevated position, the transition between the grass and the water appears fluid. Land and sea ripple with gently undulating waves and harmonize with each other. Like the house on the right picture edge, the vessels, especially the 2 sailboats in the foreground, with their clearly contoured forms and wealth of details, stand out across the landscape. Yet the divergent pictorial elements in this scene are not irreconcilably juxtaposed with each other. Hopper immerses the entire picture space in sunlight falling in from the left, thus joining the individual motifs into a single entity. He further connects the sailboats with the landscape via the motif of the wind. He shows how the boats dangerously tilt and their sails swell, in addition to leading the vessels and the cloud formations in the sky, a similarly directed dynamism. The lighthouse is another nautical motif that Hopper depicted in numerous paint drawings, watercolors, etchings, and paintings. Rendered the lighthouse at Cape Elizabeth, Maine, several times during his summer vacation there in 1927. Lighthouse Hill. Which is this one. Hopper represented it isolated and throning over the landscape. With the low vantage point, he emphasized the function of the soaring architecture as a static reference point for people on land and sea, a natural setting that virtually appears alive. The artist chose the late afternoon to paint his picture on site, a time of day when the long shadows seemingly set a varied and multicolored landscape below the lighthouse in motion as it extends beyond the edges of the picture. The contrast between suggested dynamism and stasis results in nature and civilization entering into a particularly charged relationship in this painting. The aforementioned bootleggers, 1924 or 1925. "5 a.m., 1937. Lighthouse Hill, 1927. Oil on canvas. The Martha McKean of Wellfleet, 1944. Oil on canvas. This is Lee Shore that we read about earlier. I believe that is blank page number 6. Road and Houses, South Truro, 1930 through 1933. Oil on canvas. Cobb's Barns and Distant Houses, 1930 through 1933. Oil on canvas. Cobb's Barns, South Truro, 1930 through 1933. Blank page number 7. Burley Cobb's House, South Truro, 1930 through 1933. Oil on canvas. Lombard's House, 1931, watercolor and graphite on paper. Wellfleet Road, 1931, watercolor and graphite pencil on paper. Houses and landscape. Representation of architecture is one of the most important themes in Edward Hopper's oeuvre. He had marked preference for houses in North American colonial style, which he knew from his native town of Nyack in New York. Although these buildings were seen as representative of an antiquated past, in Hopper's day, he displayed such houses in a striking manner, paintings like Railroad Crossing or The Bootleggers, which we've both seen already. In the city, an apartment house in the Second Empire style appears to you in the center of the cityscape. It is surrounded by unpretentious buildings bordering a large square. Several skyscrapers are also depicted, but they held no appeal for Hopper and are radically cut off at the upper edge of the painting. The watercolor Captain Kelly's House, which we are looking at now, on the other hand, reveals that Hopper was also attracted to more modest buildings as motifs. He was above all interested in their geometric construction and how they related to their surroundings. In most cases, as in this one, the painter represented the houses isolated. The forests and rolling hills in the background, enlivened by the play of light and shadow, contrast with this seemingly prosaic, box-shaped home. The painting conveys an impression of loneliness and isolation. Yet architecture and landscape in Hopper's compositions are not always set off against each other in unambiguous terms. Cobb's Barns, South Truro, is one of several paintings showing the same motif. It depicts a modest barn with annexes in the midst of the gentle hilly landscape at Truro on Cape Cod in Massachusetts, where Hopper and his wife spent their summers from 1930 on and ultimately also built a studio house. Hopper selected a slightly elevated vantage point for this painting, allowing him to accentuate the architecture and the surrounding landscape as a harmonious entity. This is Captain Kelly's house, 1931. That's our 7th blank page. The Camel's Hump, 1931. Oil on canvas. Landscape with Tower, 1938. First branch of the White River, 1938. Edward Hopper's landscapes mostly address humankind's interventions in nature. They often depict railroad scenes, railroad tracks and roads, motifs which the artist alludes to the development of the vast country in the 19th and 20th centuries. In the drawings on east side of Somewhere and study of a landscape with train passing houses. A hilly landscape is intersected by horizontal railroad embankments. Hopper indicates the velocity of the trains by means of blurred strokes in close proximity to the tracks and wagons, and underscores the impression that they're going past by showing only the rear sections of the train. By comparison, study of landscape with the train passing houses seems even more radical because of the right half of the drawing has been left incomplete, considerably heightening the dynamic effect of the train's motion. Both studies not only illustrate the motion of the train as distinct from static nature of the landscape and houses, they also convey the fleeting landscape impressions of a traveler, such as those Hopper experienced on his many coast-to-coast train journeys. The oil painting Railroad Sunset shows a railroad embankment in the foreground running parallel to the lower picture edge. Lies in the dark, like the other attributes of civilization flanking it, a switching tower, a telegraph mast. Stretched over the shimmering dark green landscape is an enormous sky seen at sundown, immersed in an intense dramatic interplay of red, orange, yellow, and blue. Clouds from horizontal streaks in the sky suggesting like the hills and railroad embankment extending to the left and right, the limitless expanse of the land. The Hoppers purchased their first automobile in 1927, a used car with which they took numerous trips from the rear seat of which Hopper produced many drawings in watercolors. He made the watercolor Cars and Rocks that same year. It was one of the few depictions of automobiles in Hopper's work, which, like Wellfleet Road, mostly focus on the motif of the empty road. The vehicles shown in a view from below and pose a striking counterweight to the rocky hill dominated by shades of blue and green. In his painting Gas, Hopper casts a melancholic glance at the relationship between nature and modern infrastructure. An abandoned country road at dusk is lined by a dark forest on the left, while on the right a gas station attendant busies himself at the gas pump. The diagonal staggering of the bright red pumps creates a perspectival pull into the depths of the picture that culminates at precisely the point where the street vanishes into the dark forest. In this painting, forest and filling station confront one another in contrasting terms. Further tension is generated by the juxtaposition of the natural light at dusk and the artificial illumination of the gas station. Is that our eighth? I believe it's our eighth blank page. And as you can see, this is the painting, that we were just discussing, but you will, I am sure, recognize it as the one from the cover. Route 6, Eastham, 1941. Study for Solitude, number 56. Road and Rocks, 1962. By David M. Lubin, Hopper and Hitchcock, Landscapes of the Mind. The art of Edward Hopper has proven irresistible to generations of filmmakers. Given to understatement, the artist once summed up his career by stating, "What I wanted to do was to paint sunlight on the side of a house." While this is not by any means of the goal of every great painter, it is in essence the goal of every great cinematographer. I once heard an Oscar-winning director of photography explain to students that shooting a film boils down to figuring out where the lights will go. Without light cast on walls, he said, there can be no movies. In Hopper's Cape Cod Sunset, 1934, which I believe is this one. It's been mentioned several times before. The rosy light of a summer sunset glints against the window panes of a 3-story house in the country. In Stairway, which is one of the ones we saw on our first day, a golden late afternoon light pours through an open doorway onto an interior wall. In high noon, midday sunlight casts deep shadows on the white clapboard walls and gray shingle roof of a summer cottage. Hopper's late masterpiece, Sun in an Empty Room, constructs an uninhibited, three-dimensional space out of alternating blocks of light and shadow. Jo Hopper, the artist's wife, described the painting in their ledger as white light, uncompromising shadow, stark. The painting resembles an empty film set yet to be entered by actors. Human actors, that is, for light and shadow are already players in the scene. These paintings of intense light flung onto flat surfaces mimic the black and white cinema of Hopper's era. At a meta level of interpretation, his walls are themselves movie screens onto which he projected shadows and light. If lighting is central to filmmaking, so too is camera placement. The viewing angle is central to Hopper's work as well. The scenes in some of his paintings appear to be viewed through the window of moving vehicles such as a train or automobile. Take, for example, Portrait of Orleans, which, according to Jo Hopper, the artist sketched from the inside of their car. We too look through the windshield at the traffic intersection described in the painting. The light is green. We must move. Which road do we take? Without any direct story attached to a Portrait of Orleans nonetheless plays out like this scene from a film noir. Is this one. And the painting we've been looking at is Cape Cod Evening, 1939, oil on canvas. House by the Railroad, 1925, oil on canvas. Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo, in which a private detective played by Jimmy Stewart tails a mysterious woman through the hilly streets of San Francisco. The camera assumes Stewart's perspective from behind the windshield. In doing so, it pulls us into his growing obsession with his quarry. Similarly, in Psycho, a woman who has stolen $40,000 from her employer drives through a desolate southwestern landscape as the day darkens and turns into night. Rain begins to fall. Hitchcock alternates between objective shots from outside the car and subjective shots from within, showing her vision disrupted by the windshield wiper as it slashes back and forth with brutal regularity. Robert F. Boyle, the acclaimed Hollywood production designer who collaborated with Hitchcock on 5 films, Saboteur, Shadow of a Doubt, North by Northwest, The Birds, and Marnie, recalls in an interview that the master of suspense was drawn to the Hopper look. Boyle defines this as the look of a moment in time before something has happened, or very often after it's happened, but never at the moment of its happening. This is a production photo from Psycho on the right. Boyle says Hitchcock shared with Hopper an attraction to the penultimate moment. In the filmmaker's case, this would be a small, intimate scene that anticipates and sets up a larger, more dramatic one. In Cape Cod Morning, a blondish middle-aged woman in a pink cotton dress leans forward to look out the bay window of a rural home. The morning sun enters sharply from the right, starkly illuminating her face and arms, along with the tops of the trees and yellow grass. It hits the white clapboard walls, carving deep blue shadows beneath each individual board. Hopper shows the woman to be in a sort of isolation booth or fishbowl, separated from the world around her, the frame within the frames, the dark double shutters on the roof overhang. The windows on either side of her make her seem trapped. She waits for something. We don't know what it is, but we sense her vulnerability. Joe Hopper gave the painting a prosaic interpretation, saying, "It's a woman looking out to see if the weather's good enough to hang out her wash." But the image seems so much richer and sadder than that. Leaning forward, the woman yearns for something more vital to her life than that next load of laundry. Cape Cod Evening likewise provides This is a summer evening, 1947. Sorry, just sort of skimming through this section. It didn't. I was expecting more of a connection where this is The City from 1927. We looked at this one previously, since it came up in one of the sections earlier. Houses on a Hill, 1926 or 1928. Mofil Plantation, 1942. Watercolor and graphite pencil on illustration board. Cape Cod Sunset, 1934, oil on canvas. High Noon, 1949, oil on canvas. Is that blank page number 9, I believe? Two Puritans, 1945. Um, we'll go ahead and end this here. Uh, so that we'll start off tomorrow with the forest. Um, it's already talked about a lot about its incorporation of forests. So we'll see what new they add. So we'll do that tomorrow. Um, I might be, I'm not. I might be on tonight as well. I've finished something that's really been keeping me back from streaming as much as I liked, so uh, should be able to expect more streams. Um, so we should be picking back up Game Wizards tonight. Uh, They'll most likely be in 3 to 4 hours. Uh, so I'm going to end it here and see you tonight or tomorrow.